Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Hello, Fortitude audience. Thank you so much for joining us again today. My name is Heather Kittleson, and I am your host, sitting here with my wonderful husband, Amos.
Hello.
And today in our studio, we have Lon and Grace. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, everyone.
We're so excited about the testimony that's going to be told today. Lon was brought into my life probably a year and a half ago or somewhere around there, I think.
I would say that's about right.
I was going to look it back up this morning. Just on my LinkedIn, I think I reached out to you and said, hey, can we grab lunch? So we sat at a local restaurant and had a wonderful conversation about how both of us were feeling called to do something more. And we bounced ideas off each other. You were just dabbling into Normal 40, which is your new business, which is so wonderful. I want you to speak to that a little bit. And you've recently become an author, and it's flying off the shelves. So I'm really excited about our audience to learn about your book called The Trade. And the more we got to know each other, and the more that I follow your LinkedIn page, and I've been watching your growth and all the things happening, hearing Grace's story, your daughter, who is with us, I was blown away by the way you both handled everything that went on, and how open and honest you're being about it is really special. And so I want to start with you, Lon. And if you could just tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you've been dabbling in, and then you can jump right into chapter 12.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Well, it's been a ride. It's been a ride. So a little bit about me. I'm a South Dakota born and raised farm kid, and that's truly how I see myself. And that's how I've carried myself through each of the three different careers that I've had. I graduated from South Dakota State University here in South Dakota. I expected to go home and be a farmer, and my phone rang in January before my graduating semester, and it was a U.S. Senator's office. And the individual on the end of the line said, we're interested in you coming to work for us, being the eyes and the ears for the senator while he's in Washington, D.C. We understand you have an appreciation and a passion for agriculture. You have a good ability to relate with people. And we would like your help in writing the next ag bill and to be a member of the senator's staff. And look, that call came out of left field. I didn't expect it to happen. I was a farmer. I already had 120 head of cattle. I had ground rented. Anyway, long story short, I realized that call probably wasn't going to happen again. So I went home and I told my dad, and that ended up being one. Speaking of trades, that is a trade I talk about in my book as being the first trade in a series of a few that dramatically altered the course of my life. And so fast forward, I worked for that particular U.S. Senator for 6 years. Then I spent 6 years working in finance and banking. I loved it. I learned that people who looked like they had money usually didn't, and the people who looked like they might not have enough gas to make it into the meeting in the bank are actually doing really, really well. And so you learn not to judge a book by a color, but to really get in and understand business and what makes it work and what makes people good at what they do and what makes them, what's just a facade. And then for the last 14 years, well, the next 14 years, I should say, I worked for a public company. And I ended there leading mergers and acquisitions for a public company, and we transacted. And I was a sell-side M&A guy. And when the deal was coming to an end, something inside of me was really burning to go do something else. I'd done well. I'd lived my life by the book. I'd done everything I wanted to do professionally, and I didn't have to go. But something inside of me was calling, and I didn't know what it was, and I realized that my future wasn't at that company. Mm-hmm. So I separated. And when I left, I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know where I was going to go. So I went to LinkedIn and I just wrote about my story, about what I did, what I had the chance to stay and do, but that I felt called to something greater, something bigger. And I didn't know what it was, but I did it anyway. And I'm going to go figure it out. And my inbox blew up with people from around the world saying, I feel the same way. I want to do the same thing. How'd you know you had enough? How'd you know it was your time? What'd your wife say? What do your kids think? Mm-hmm. What'd your boss say when you told them? All of the things. I realized in that moment, okay, there's something here. I'm going to lean into that. And fast forward, Heather, I think that's about the time that you and I met. Mm-hmm. I was just leaning into that feeling, and you were picking up on it.
I was.
With where you were at in your life. And that's the serendipity of this all, mm-hmm. in that that's the thing that brought us together.
Lon, you threw out a piece of paper that was all chicken scratching about it. It was so beautiful. You're like, this is what I'm doing. Like this, I just got certified, and you're like, you showed all the scribbles and all the little circles with the lines to them, and what I'm like, this is so awesome. I got so excited for you because you had just left.
Yeah.
You had just left Raven.
Yeah. And I didn't have a clue really what I was going to do. I was just going to show up curious. Yeah. And whatever was leaning on me and my skills, I was going to lean right back and lean into it. And fast forward 18 months from roughly, not even, probably 15 months from that time, my life, I tell people, don't ever underestimate how much your life can change in a year when you just show up curious to who you are.
Yeah. And allow... From this seat, I always say, allowing God to fully lead your steps. If you just press in and you're like, let's go. I'm willing and ready and curious. I love the word curious because I'll tell my kids all the time, or we do, be curious, be curious. But you are curious enough to where it's led you into a whole new life where you're helping so many people. But one piece of your story that is true to my heart that brings tears to my eyes actually is going back to your time. You were so involved and so in the thick of it with your corporate career that you lost sight of some things. And I think a lot of us do that. There's so many of us parents who are in the thick of it, and we're every day waking up, we're going to our jobs, we're go, and we lose sight of what's behind our four walls. And Amos and I are really passionate about family and the foundation of family and helping families start getting curious about each other and learning to thoroughly ask the right questions of what's going on and to dig deep. And so I loved your vulnerability in your book because you spoke to this. You spoke directly to how you lost sight of something that was right in front of you. So can you speak to that? And then we'll have Grace move into that.
Yeah, the name of my company is Normal 40, and that's not by accident. I believe that, I say this, and it gets some pushback, but I believe that every single person at some point in their life meets this intersection of the person they've become to that point and the person they're capable of being in their own mind. And I believe that they can, even though they can't articulate it, they can't put words around it, they know that the person that they're capable of being isn't even the path that they're on. And so they wrestle with this. And I call that Normal 40 because it's normal and nobody talks about it. And it happens somewhere when you've got about 40 years of life left to live. Mm-hmm. So it's Normal 40. And that was me. I was in my mid-40s. I had done, like I said, I have led a professional life that I could not be more proud of. Mm-hmm. And along that journey, probably every single person who's hearing my voice right now through this podcast has been, will be, or is currently in the throes of a portion of their life that is so busy they feel completely out of control.
Yeah.
Just absolutely beside themselves, out of control. So what do? You just get into this pattern. And every pattern, every day is a pattern, every week is a pattern, every month is a pattern. And if you work for a public company, every quarter is a pattern. And so you just you get up and you do your thing, and maybe you work out, maybe you don't. You're thinking about your first meeting and your second meeting, and you're just grinding it out. And if you're the provider in the household, you have to grind it out. Because that's the agreement. That's the unwritten agreement of a marriage. Typically, one person climbs, sacrifices, travels, claws, all the things, misses birthdays, misses anniversaries. But the agreement is, it's unwritten, but the agreement is when you get married, one is going to climb and one is going to provide, and one is going to kind of take care of the family. Well, that was ours. That's not universal, but I think by and large, it's substantially most households. And so I was in that phase. I was in that place where I was climbing and building and growing. And in 2021, the company I worked for was going through a transaction. So the company was 65 years old. And we got courted by several different larger companies. And long story short, we were going to transact. Well, I was the mergers and acquisitions guy for the sell side. And so it was two things. It was the pinnacle of my professional career, but it was also but it was also kind of everything I'd prepared myself to be. So as all of this was going on, I was busy. I was important.
Yeah.
I was distracted. I was the guy at work who had to go be the guy at work. And when you get into that pattern, day by day, week by week, month by month, quarter by quarter, you really allow yourself to look past some of the things that are going on right under your own nose. And you think that that's normal and you think that it's right. And so you just kind of go through the motions and you keep going through the motions until something happens and it just absolutely jerks you into a mental state where everything gets recalibrated. And what was important isn't, what wasn't important is, and you do an entirely new accounting of what you're going to do from that day, that week, that month, and that quarter forward. Yeah. And that was the moment I had on the night before my last day as a public company executive.
How many hours a week were you working, do you think, up till that point?
So look, there's two ways to describe that. I think, in the office, I was probably 50 hours a week, which I think is normal. But I write about in my book, and I think there again, people are going to be able to relate to this. If you really think about when you're not working, when is that? Because if my boss or a colleague would have texted me at 6 a.m., I was going to answer it. If my boss or a colleague or a customer would have texted me at 9 p.m., I would have answered it. Yeah. So technically, was that part of my 55 hours? No. But was I working? Hell yeah.
Constantly, all the time.
Always, never off.
Yeah.
I write about in the book, I remember Grace and her two brothers were way younger, but we were at Disney World. And we're standing in the line of Peter Pan, and I'm starting to get texts from work. And there I am, totally distracted, in the line at Disney World, cranking out this 3-page email on an old, it's not even a good style smartphone. This goes back a ways. Yeah. And so I'm clucking it out, and the world's going on around me. And there I am.
Yeah.
Totally absent.
It's amazing how those boundaries get eroded over time, and you just don't recognize them until you have to respect the boundary. It sounds like we're about to talk about that.
Yeah. Yep. So I just realized, in the world of marriage, I did forget to communicate with my husband that we're going to talk and just talk, not keep it at 45 minutes.
Oh, we going a long format today?
So we might go a little bit longer because Amos is really good. He's like the time guy, and he will be pointing at this clock for me. And so I wanted to just relieve myself of that in my head because Lon and I spoke before this. And we said, we're just going to let it go a little longer. So for our audience, just know that this could be, because this is too good to have a time limit on it. So
this is important.
Lon, I can relate to that so much because same. I just quit my 40-hour and plus job, but I'm answering things. I'm doing things for the podcast. I'm doing things for the speaking and lining stuff up all day long. Periodically at the pool or wherever I'm at with the kids, it's constant. You're not working. We're always in the frame of mind of moving the needle forward. And so as you are driving, which I love how you articulate this, and you move the whole story through your car with you to the celebration, the night that you get the phone call from your daughter. And so can you move into that? And then Grace, I want to hear your perspective as you were picking up that phone to call your dad. Okay. So tell us how that all transpired, Lon.
So a little bit of backstory, and Grace is going to go into it in much more detail, but there was a situation probably a few years before I separated from my company. And in what I consider in self-reflection post-situation, it was classic lousy, I'm too busy parenting. Like I said, Grace is going to get into this a little bit more, so I don't know how much to tell and how much not to. But the point of the matter is this. Grace had come to my wife and I, her mom and I, and explained to us that there had been something that had happened, and it had been very bothersome to her. And we felt like we were responsive and active, and we reached out to other parents who were involved, and we felt like we were doing everything we needed to do as parents just to protect her and protect ourselves and really be helpful. But then we did something wrong. We assumed that when things were dealt with, we could put it back on the shelf and that we could walk away from it. And then it was just kind of like something that once happened, not something that is happening. And I think that if you're a parent, that's what I want you to hear. It's my wife, Mindy, and I really thought that when we had dealt with it in the micro, and we dealt with it immediately and swiftly, that we had dealt with it. It was kind of done. It was behind us. It can be behind her, and we'll move on. Well, what we realized is in that time is that we were moving on and she wasn't. And when that happened, Grace got wonderfully talented at hiding how she was feeling. Really great. Wonderfully talented. Until this point that I'm going to talk about now, and I'm going to let Grace fill in all the gaps there. But it was now the day before my last day as a public company executive. And what happens after your company sells is you have a big party. Like it's a once kind of in a professional lifetime, maybe twice if you're really lucky, opportunity to just celebrate your crowning achievement. And we had done that. And so the executive team and all of our advisors from Washington, D.C., from New York, I mean, the biggest of the big names, they were coming in and we were just going to celebrate everything that we had done. And it was, I was at the office, I went home to change clothes, and then I was going back to the party because that was like I said, I wanted to do all my goodbyes, and it was a me day, right? Mm-hmm. It was look at me, and that's what it was. And so I came home and I left, and I was driving back to the party, and my text messages would lighten up from all my colleagues, like, hey, when are you coming? When are you going to be here? Everybody's waiting. And I'm like, yep, I'm on my way. And then my phone rang, and I can walk you to within probably about 2 square feet of where my car was when my phone rang on the planet. And it was Grace. And of course, her name comes up, and I'm driving and I look at it. And now this is the part I write about this. Mm-hmm. I'm ashamed about what happens from here. I look at it and I put my phone back down in my passenger seat, and I just immediately think this can wait. But something immediately said, just answer it. So I did. I grabbed the phone, and I said, "Hey, Grace, what's going on?" She said, "Dad, I'm not good." Well, as a dad, the first thing you think of in that moment is, okay, not uncommon for a teenage girl to be having a bad day. All right, so what's going on, Grace? And she said, "Dad, I need to go to the hospital." Okay, page 2. Now I'm thinking, okay, she's a cheerleader, she's into gymnastics, she's driving, maybe there was an accident, maybe she's hurt physically. And I'm like, okay, what happened? Tell me more. And she said, "Dad, I'm not good. I'm not good, and I'm having bad thoughts." So now that's different. Now page 3 is a different page, and I'm still reasoning through this. But keep in mind, I'm still operating from hey, we put this on the shelf a year ago. Yeah, she's been good. Yeah. So I remember saying out loud, "Grace, can we deal with this tomorrow?
Yeah.
Can we just deal with this tomorrow?" And then she said probably the 6 words that I will never forget. "Dad, I'm not good, and I need you to believe me." Mm-hmm. When your child says, "I need you to believe me," please listen. Mm-hmm. She had my attention. And I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And she said, "I'm having bad thoughts, and I need to go see a doctor. I need to go see someone about this." I said, "Okay, I'm turning around, I'm coming home, and I'm yours." And her mom she's a kindergarten teacher, and she was still at school. And so I called her, and she came home. And I'll stop there, and we'll get into where the story goes from there. But I'm going to turn it over to Grace to fill in the gaps. But that was the moment. That was the very unproud, and I'm going to say this, very normal moment that I think a lot of parents are they're going to feel what I just said about can this wait? They're going to have looked at their phone and said, "I'm going to answer this later." And had I acted on my original instincts, we might be having a very different conversation on this podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is. I've been in your situation where I got that prompting, and Heather and I have a very similar story. And so it's easy to minimalize and to think and have rose-colored glasses about that moment. It really is, and that's a normal thing. And same, where I had a prompting from the Lord that said, you need to work from home today. And I also said, nah, why? You know, I need to go to the office. That's where work happens. And it could turn around and we were able to intervene on your story.
Yeah.
But it's not about me. But I just want to say that's very, like what you said, it's common. That's normal. And there's a lot of people out there that are listening to this have a terrible outcome and regret to those. What would you say to someone who's feeling regret because they didn't make the type of decision that you did?
I don't know if there's anything I can say. I would say, look, and I talk about it in the book, probably the only thing that differentiates me from someone who got a different phone call, not from their daughter asking for help, but from a sheriff saying, I need you to come in here. There's been an incident. The only difference that separates me from most of those parents who are also smart, articulate, hardworking, loving, and busy is that I got lucky.
Yeah.
And I had a daughter who's smart, intelligent, brave, and she parented me when I needed it.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I got lucky. I got lucky. And so, man, if somebody is on that side of the story, my heart goes out. I have nothing but love and admiration. And I know that it is not the result of bad parenting.
Right.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. There's your voice. I want to, there's also along those lines, you had said Grace was so good at hiding it. I was so good at hiding it.
Yeah.
So that is usually the case. It's not the bad parenting. It is not that the parents did not love their children or do what they would do as a parent. Our world there's so much in our world that is so far gone, right? And there's like this deep, deep, deep sadness and darkness that a lot of people deal with. And no matter how hard we try as parents, unfortunately, there's so many that are good at hiding it until it's right.
This is really important, and I want to be sure I get it out now because I would hate to skip over this. And I didn't realize this until after everything. If you are struggling with something and you're hiding it. You're hiding it for real, very personal reasons. But when you're an outsider and you don't know what's going on, what you think about when you reason about it in your head is, well, and I'm just going to use Grace. What my natural instinct was, and Mindy's too, my wife was, man, what did we get wrong? We've tried to give her everything. We've tried to provide her the opportunities. We've tried to provide a loving home. And in our mind, we use our cerebral, what you'd think about as being healthy and good and all the things that should be helpful. But it wasn't until Grace and I, after she'd come back home from the hospital and we were having a heart-to-heart, that I realized that actually makes it worse. Because when we were, when she told me this, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And this is why I want everybody to hear this. It was harder for Grace because of how blessed she was on so many levels. Because when she was feeling like she was feeling, I'll never forget when you told me this, Grace. When you were feeling like you were feeling, and you couldn't blame a divorce. You couldn't blame a broken home. You couldn't blame drugs and alcohol. You couldn't blame so many things. Who are you going to blame? Who's left? You wore that. And it wasn't until you told me that, and once you did, what an enlightening moment. But it's so powerful and no matter which side of this you're on, somebody who's struggling and just trying to figure out how to bust your way out of it, or somebody who's wondering if somebody's struggling and wondering how you can help. Just know that by making everything on the outside, the better that is sometimes, the harder it is for those who are struggling. It actually makes it worse. The beautiful family, the loving husband, all the things that I'm sure, whose fault is it if you can't be happy when you've got that?
Yeah.
You wear it,
Yeah.
and it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And what do? You get better and better and better about hiding it.
Yeah.
These are all things that I learned the hard way. I mean, I don't want anybody to think that I'm here preaching like I've got it figured out. I don't. But these are lessons that I'm here so that we can help the next person avoid some of these things. So sharing some of the things that I learned along the way, I'm hoping just opens the door to some conversations.
Yes. That's all we want. Yeah. Wow. That's good. Thank you for sharing all that, because you're right. You're spot on. How dare I feel this way? How dare I go here, go there? Because I have a beautiful husband who loves me and 4 beautiful kids. And I would sit there, and that's what would draw me deeper and deeper and deeper into that spot that we're going to go to, Grace. So share your side of things. If you can, go back.
Okay, will do. So, yes, there was an incident that had happened with a boy when I was 15. It was my sophomore year of high school, New Year's Eve. But then again, that situation had happened, and I was like, there's no way that could have ever happened to me. Like, there's no way that I was sexually assaulted. Like, that wouldn't happen to me. Like, I've been raised, I have a voice, but in that moment, after 3 years later, I learned that was a trauma response. I froze, and I didn't know what to do. So, but back then, when I was 15, I was little. I was innocent. I was like, this is just all my fault. And so, yeah, I told my parents about that. I wasn't originally going to.
Did you right away?
I did. I told them a day or 2 after.
Wow, that's big.
Yes.
Kudos to you, Lon. I want to just state that, because open communication in a household is so important.
Yeah.
That a child can feel like they can go to their parents or a sibling or someone and open up right away. So good for you that you did that.
Thank you. Yes. And then, like what my dad said, I just was like, all right, you got to get over it. Like, it happened. There's nothing you can do. And, you just got to keep going. Like, there's nothing you can do. And then that was January of 2020. So then COVID hit. And so then that added on isolation on top of all of this. And just like the world stopped in the anxiety of COVID. And just like the isolation piece really became a big thing for me. So then, the world was shut down. This had just happened 3 months prior, and I was just alone with my thoughts. And so that kind of started to eat at me more and more and more. And then when we finally got to kind of where it was getting a little bit better, and got back to school then my junior year, I thought things would be better. Because, you're back in school, you're back with your friends. I was in cheer, but things got worse. They got worse before anything. And so I kind of suffered my way through my junior year, fought through it, and then first semester of my senior year hit, and same thing. It's still just like, some days were good, some days were horrible, but I was so good at masking my feelings, I kind of started to believe that I was okay.
But Grace, what were your feelings? Like, when you say things started to get harder, what were you internalizing? What were you going through?
I was just blaming myself for, one, what had happened. Like, this is all my fault, just a lot of that guilt and shame. And then when that, like, depression and anxiety piece came, that only added to the guilt, that added to the shame. Like, how could I let this happen? Like, how could I have done this to my parents? How could I have done this to myself and even his family? I felt bad for his family because I had put them in this situation.
Aww.
Yes.
So you're in your senior year.
Yes. Yep. I'm in my senior year. It was January 26th to be exact. It was a Wednesday night after school. And I was just feeling really down, really, really sad. I was starting to have really bad suicidal thoughts, and I had dealt with those for a good like 2 years off and on, you know, leading up to this. But this night I had during that school day, a teacher kind of like snapped at me and was like, "Don't talk while I talk," and that just like put me over the edge. And I apologized, and my apology wasn't accepted. And so then I was like, "That's it. I'm done. I'm so done." And so, yep, I went home. I just cried, and I was like this is it. Like, if I'm so upset with myself, and like even my teachers don't like me and value me. And so, yeah, and it just like kept eating at me, and I was home alone, and yeah, but I'm so blessed that this part is where the Lord comes in and intervenes this whole situation. One of the teachers that worked at the school, she wasn't my teacher at the time, but she was just young, super sweet. She had given me her number a couple months prior and was like, "Text me or call me if you ever need to talk or anything." Like, well, you know, she wasn't, yeah, she had been my teacher a while back, but she wasn't. And so
The teacher gave you her cell phone number.
She did.
Did she know your situation?
No.
She did not. Okay.
No. And I texted her and I was like, "Hey, can you call me when you leave work?" Because I was a senior, so I was home during the school day.
Okay.
That's why I was like home alone. And she had left work early because she's told me this story. She felt the Lord saying, "You need to leave and you need to go call that girl. You need to go call Grace." So she called me, and I'm just bawling. And I'm like, "I don't know what to do." And she didn't even ask questions. She just said, "Get out of your house. You need to get out of your house and meet me somewhere."
Mm-hmm.
And she sat with me for 4 hours in a parking lot in her car. And I didn't tell her that I was going to end my life. I didn't tell her anything until I went home, because my parents then had gotten home. And when I got home, I texted her and I was like, "Thank you for saving my life." And she told me she just like collapsed to the floor when I sent that. And then, yeah, the next day, that is when I called my dad and was like, I need to go to the hospital. I'm still feeling this way. I need help.
So this conversation with your teacher was the day before she called
Yes.
you?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It was the day before. And yep, so the next day, kind of same thing, just going through the motions. I was trying to work up the courage to ask my parents, if I could go get help, because I was miserable, and I knew deep down that I didn't want to die.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want that. I just wanted the pain to end.
Yeah.
And I felt that, I felt that through the Lord. Like, I knew the Lord wasn't done with me.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that. And I mean, I just knew that deep down, even though the voices in my head were so much louder, I could still hear his voice. So yes, the next day called my dad, and I had no idea that it was his big day.
You didn't?
No. I don't even know if you knew that. I didn't know that. My mom had said something like he was at work, but I was like, I need to call my dad. And I called him first before my mom. And so I did. And yeah, I called him, and I barely remember calling him, but I just remember crying and being like, I need to go now. And the next day, or that night we went in. I got an assessment done at Avera Behavioral, which is like a hospital in town. And I got that assessment done. They said, they came in, they talked to my parents, and they said, I think it would be good for her to get admitted into our facility. And so then
Was that scary for you?
Oh, I was scared, but I was relieved. I was like, this girl believes me.
Yeah.
Because I still wasn't 100% sure if my parents would like know how bad it was. It's like, this girl sees me. But then I think it got real when she started going over, you know, like the safety plan for when to go home.
Yeah.
Since I was still going home for that night, since they didn't have any beds available, first of all, they were full. So I had to go back the next day and get admitted and wait for someone else to get discharged. And so we went home, and they gave my mom and my dad a pamphlet of like a safety plan when you go home. And it was, you know, make sure all the pills in the cabinets are locked, hidden. She asked if there were any guns in the house. And I just remember my mom was just, her jaw was just like dropped, and she was like, what do you mean? Like, just like shaking her head, like in complete disbelief. Like, that couldn't be my daughter, you know? And I felt bad because I was like, I didn't know, you know? I was like, no way, like, this is happening. Like,
It's so surreal, isn't
it's
it?
so surreal. Yeah. But at the same time, through it all, I was just so relieved that this doctor had believed me, and I had some hope because I was like, all right, the next day, it's going to be a start, new chapter, here we go. And so, yeah, the next day, that next morning, my dad took me in, and I got admitted, and the admission process was awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's awful, grueling process.
Awful because it takes time, or because it's so personal?
It's just so much. You get taken into this room. She told me to take out my jewelry. I had just gotten my nose pierced, and she was like, take that out.
You're
And I
like,
was
no, it's going to close up.
like,
I want to
"Oh."
keep that.
I know. And she had taken my phone away, and I was just texting the teacher. I was just texting her where I was going, and I was saying goodbye, and I didn't get to finish my text before my phone got taken. So then I got emotional, and I was like, my phone, like, I need to just finish the text. But yeah. And then
Grueling, but worth it.
It was. But I was wearing a hooded sweatshirt when I went in there, and they were like, nope, you can't wear that. You have to change. And they gave me a sweatshirt to change into, and I was like, man, and they took my shoes.
Yeah.
And then I had to walk back in and sit with my dad as he was getting hammered with, this is what we're going to be doing each and every day. This is what your daughter's going to be going through. Like, this is that, the, you know, scenarios. And I walked in, and he had tears in his eyes, and I was crying. It was just, yeah.
The whole yeah, wow. I feel clammy listening to you talk about that, because I've been there, and there's nothing, you realize the severity of it, right? So you don't go in because you're going to have a birthday cake and they're going to sing to you. You're going in because it's a matter of life or death.
Yes.
And so some people's situations are harder than others. Some people's are like, this is their 5th, 6th attempt. And they are, I mean, it's so, because everyone's story is so all over the board that they have to treat you pretty much the same. Like when they were taking things from me, my compact for my makeup.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do you, and they're like, because someone could break that glass.
Yep.
And they could slit themselves with it. And I was like, what? Or they took my conditioner, because some people get high on conditioner. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Like, come on, people. But it was so, then I realized quickly, like, wow, this is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Like, with the state that I am in, this is no joke.
Yeah.
And even though I was kicking and screaming.
And thank goodness they take it.
Yeah.
They're professionals. They take it seriously.
Yeah, they know.
Yeah. Even when we were like, no, this isn't right. I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not that bad.
Yep.
I'm not that bad. Well, it's just a matter of time that we get there, right?
Yeah.
So something that thank you for sharing all of that,
Yes.
Grace, first off, because that's, your story is happening all over the place right now. We're hearing it more and more and more, that it's getting actually younger in age, the suicidal thoughts, 8-year-olds,
Yep. Yeah.
7-year-olds, like people that were like, wait, you're supposed to be out playing with frogs in the front yard, like joyful and loving, like coming from parents of a 6, 7, 8-year-old who has frogs in the front yard, literally, like that's what they're supposed to be doing. And yet they're admitting into to hospitals. So can you speak to the young men and women that are in your situation that, or the grace that was there on New Year's, like, we really want to teach. Something that is on my heart is to teach our younger generation who they are and how precious they are in Christ, like their purpose on this earth, and how beautiful, like their mindset of their purpose. If we were to get that right in our kids from the very beginning, like, I'm on this earth, I have a mission to do, and you don't get to do things to me. Like, you don't, like, the boundaries, right? So boundaries are not taught. They weren't taught to me as a kid. I got myself in situations. I was raped in college because I was just a people pleaser, and I allowed people to do what they want with me. Cause I'm like, oh, well, I want to make you happy.
Right.
Okay. Like, no.
Yeah.
No. We have to be able to speak into the lives of individuals and say, this is your body. This is your purpose, your life. You do not get to do things to me unless I give you permission.
Right.
And so there's just this education piece that's missing. I really believe in in general, from boundaries to love languages to different things. And so speak to other people who have maybe gone through what you went through, and then just what you wished you would have processed differently, how you can speak into the lives of them.
Sure. Yeah. So, like you mentioned, boundaries, I think that's such an important thing to teach, and it's not selfish. It's not selfish to set a boundary and say, you know what, I don't like when you touch me, or I don't like when you say that to me, or that makes me uncomfortable. Like, it's okay to say that. Like, you were born, like, the Lord handcrafted you. Like, you were born in the image of God. You do not need to be ashamed to say what you need.
Yeah.
Like, it's just so important. It's not selfish. If the other person maybe needs to take a step back, maybe they are doing this to multiple people, for you to take that brave step and say, no, thank you. I don't want to. Not today. That's okay. That's so important, and that's okay. And that's something to be proud of once you say it.
Yeah.
But then there's also that piece, like, if something did happen and you didn't say it, and you're ashamed because you let it happen. You didn't let it happen. Like, someone, my therapist had told me this, and it's really stuck with me. Like, you could be standing in front of someone naked, and that doesn't give them the right to touch you. And I think that's so powerful, because it's so true. It's so true. And so, like, they did that to you. You did not put yourself in that situation. You didn't know. It's a trauma response. You either freeze. There's the fawn response, which is the people pleaser response, which I had, like, that fawn response, the freeze response, and then the flight response. And all people are different, and you never know how you're going to react in that situation. And, like, it's okay. Like, I'm so sorry that happened to you, if it did, 'cause it's awful, and it shakes your whole world. It takes a lot away from you that you'll never ever be able to get back. But no matter what the severity is, it doesn't matter if you were saying no and fighting back, like, it happened, or you didn't say anything at all. Like, that's still a trauma response. That's still something that happened to you, not because of you, So I think that's something really big that I'm, like, passionate about too. And then just something that I wish I would have realized earlier, was to accept the fact that he did that to me, and it wasn't my fault just because I didn't say no, or because I didn't fight back, or anything like that. So just, yeah, I don't know how
Kind
to
of
word
that it takes two.
Yes.
So it was the guilt and everything does not fall onto you,
Yes.
which you were taking.
Right. And then that makes a already very hard situation even harder. And then to carry that by yourself, like, man, that's just too much. That's too hard.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just to make sure you talk about it, tell someone. But like also, when I first had told my parents the situation, I had told it from a point of view as if it was my fault, because that's what I believed. So if that makes sense.
When you told them, did you think it was done like your parents did? Did you feel relief, and did you think, oh, okay, we can move on? Or what was the next day like?
Not at all. I was relieved that I had told them, but then I never wanted to talk about it again.
So then it would have become a challenge. If they'd brought it up, what would you have said?
I'm probably like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm fine. Yeah.
Which feeds into
This
the
is
situation.
real. This is real. What she's talking about right here, and that, and we can I ask Grace a question?
Please.
I'm learning here too. Grace, I want you to go back to roughly 2 weeks before we took you into Avera Behavioral Health, and I want you to channel you, who you were then. What advice would you have today for you then? What would you go back and tell yourself to do in hopes of getting help?
Oh gosh, that's a hard question. Honestly, I would just tell them to pray. I would, because I know it sounds silly. That's so cliche,
No,
but
you're
it's
spot on.
it's just such. I prayed. I never, through it all, never stopped praying, and that honestly made the guilt worse, because I was like, I'm still following the Lord. How could I possibly feel so sad and so over life? Like, I knew that I was a child of God. I knew He handcrafted me. I knew all the things that He had in store for me. But I still felt this way, so that added to the guilt.
Yeah.
But I'm so glad I never stopped talking to Him about it, because He gave me Alyssa, the teacher.
Yeah. Which, for those who are listening to this and may not even know the Lord, like, right? There's a lot of people who are like, what? Who's this? Pray? How do I pray? And I do believe that and I learned in treatment too, a higher power, right? They use that in the 12 steps, your higher power. Just talk, just pray to your higher power. I don't care if it's an apple. You have to be able to have a two-way, even if it doesn't feel like two-way.
That's what the 12 step says. It says find that, whatever that is.
Define whatever your higher power
Whatever
is,
that
even
is.
if you don't believe in God, right?
Yeah.
And so, but there is a God, and the fact that you are praying, like, just give me, I need something, Lord. And this beautiful soul that He gave to you is, to come full circle, that's how He works.
What did that prayer look like? Were you on your hands and knees? Was it just on the way to school, a quick in your head? Can you describe what your prayers looked like? The reason for the question is because I think some people go, I'm not praying enough, or the right way, or the hard way.
Right. To be honest, I probably should have prayed more. I didn't really pray when I was at school, but when I got down to it, when it was between I'm going to make this horrible decision, when I was going to just be done, all I had left was to pray. So usually I was in my bed, just looking out the window, I would try and, take a deep breath, fold my hands, close my eyes, and just talk out loud. I would say, Lord, help show me the road that you have for me, because I know it's there. Help make it more clear. Help, give me help, and yeah, there's no right or wrong way to pray.
No, there's not.
So that's the beauty in it. Right. There's no pressure behind how you need to pray or what you should do. Just
do it.
Just do it. Don't be afraid. The Lord will hear you.
Yeah.
No matter
He'll
what.
meet you where you're at. He
Yep.
loves you.
Yes.
He's not going to say, not on your knees.
Right. Exactly.
Just pray.
Yeah.
It's such an unconditional love that no
Yes.
matter what you say,
Yes.
there's no right or wrong at all.
Yes.
Unconditional.
And it may not feel like he hears you because you still feel broken, but oh boy, he does.
I always, the interview right before this, he used the term checkmate. And he would say how every single time something felt like how God always came back and was like, see,
Yes.
he's working behind the scenes
Yeah.
all the time, and will put things and people and different things in your life that you'll see and you'll go, oh, all along, you've been here all along, even when you don't feel him or feel like he's there.
Yeah.
And
Just
he's
listen.
working overtime for each and every one of us.
Yeah.
Something else I just want to speak to, Lon, because on the parent side of things, there's a lot of, like you said, man, we're all in this just grind, and we're going, and just some advice as to how, when you look back to those moments, maybe things you would have done differently. Put yourself in those spots.
It's really easy to find yourself distracted and not present. So I'll give two pieces of advice. One is find a language that works with your kids, because your language that you use with your spouse doesn't work with your kids. No, it doesn't.
Grace is shaking her head over here.
And it doesn't. And you'll think that it does, and you'll think that it should, and you will convince yourself when you say something, you've done something, you've communicated it, but it's not the right language. And so my advice for both before and after is find the language that you need. And if that means, and you got to get creative. You got to kind of get creative. I remember downloading Snapchat, not because I had a bunch of people I wanted to toss some snaps to, because that's what my kids were on.
Heck yeah.
That's what my kids are on. If they're not going to respond to a text, but apparently if I snap them, they'll reply back, or if I do some filters, I can engage.
Yep.
And it's learning a language, and you've got to do that. And the other language we created after this incident was, and Grace said something super important. After she told Mindy and I about what she'd gone through, she said she didn't want to talk about it anymore. Well, we did. We did. And we would try to talk to her, and she would shut us down, walk out. It wasn't the language. It was intrusive. It was all the things she didn't want to talk about. You want to say something? Please,
Yes,
go
I'm
ahead.
raising my hand.
Raising her hand. I love it.
I've never seen her do this before. It's foreign to me.
Please, Dad.
Yes.
I'm here.
Okay, wait, now I kind of forgot what it was. Oh, yes. I remember I didn't want to talk about it because I didn't really feel heard by my parents.
The first time.
The first time I had talked to them about it, because they had to learn how to listen to me. There was so much that they wanted to say about the situation, and all the questions that they wanted to ask that I didn't have the answers to, because I didn't even fully remember what had happened
Right.
that night. And so I just didn't feel heard, and I was so embarrassed. I was like, this is just all my fault. So
Oh, that's a good point, because it's a very personal thing you're talking
Yes,
about with your parents.
and I felt bad that I was the kid that had to give them this trouble and this worry and all this. I felt bad that I was the kid that had to mess it up.
Gosh, Grace, you just, the whole, like, if I sum it up, it's like you became a burden in your mind to everybody around you because of what had happened. Like, I didn't want to burden my mom and dad with all this stuff and make it their problem now. And like, that's hard.
Yeah.
That's hard. And all you wanted to do was take it from her, Lon.
All we want to do is fix it.
Yeah.
What a tough
That's what we're doing.
situation.
Yeah.
You both are kind of like going the same direction, but opposite directions at the same time.
Or like magnets that like won't actually click. You know how you like,
Yeah.
you like,
That's actually fun.
or you're like, do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The negative and positive.
Yeah.
I want to close this loop on language.
Okay.
One of the things we learned, and we got a lot wrong. My God, dang it, we got a lot wrong. But it wasn't for a lack of care or love or trying. It's just you got to learn a new language. And you parent here, you parent something like this. You through your professional life, and you parent toddlers and elementary school kids and middle school kids with your mouth. And you coach them and teach them, and you really you mold them through action, of course, but you also mold them through correcting them by use of your mouth. But in this situation, all of our feedback, all of our questions, all of our advice, all of the things that normally we could solve with our advice and just being parents and having been through this, it was futile. It was worthless. It was an attack. We didn't know it. I mean, obviously, but she was feeling attacked. So when we'd come back and the next week or the next month or whatever, we'd come back, we'd want to talk about it, she would shut us down. Well, that's not acceptable either. So we decided we would create a language, and it was simple. It was a numbering system. I said, Grace, here's the deal. You don't want to talk about it, and you don't have to. But we're your parents, and we want to know about it, and we get to. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a numbering system from 1 through 5. Okay? And 1 is I'm doing great, no problems. 2 is
other way
I got
around.
it backwards. Sorry, better get this right. 5 is I'm doing great, no worries.
Disney World is the example you
Yep,
gave.
Disney
that's a
World.
good
Thank you.
example.
Gosh, what a good example. So 5, Disney World mindset. I'm floating, I'm flying, I'm on top of the world. I got nothing to worry about. 4, pretty good. Just, whatever. I got in a fight with a friend. We're cool. Now 3 is, I've had a string of some bad days. 2 is keep an eye on me, and I don't want to talk right now, but I've got some things I'm working through. And 1, I told her, if I ever get a 1, I'm coming for you. No matter where you are on the face of this planet, I'm coming for you. And what she gave me on January 28th was a 1. And I came for her.
Yeah.
And that was a way for us to communicate without being intrusive. And the other agreement was, if she gave us a 3, we couldn't follow it up with what happened. We just got the number. And the only time when we were going to dig in was if we got a 1 and maybe a 2. And that was the agreement. Yeah. So she could just give us a number, and we're done.
And
we're
how often
done
did
here.
you ask?
I would say early on it was regularly, daily, and then weekly. And even now, even today, I heard Mom ask you just recently,
Yeah.
give me a number.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Nice.
it works.
And how did you feel about the number, Grace?
I had a love-hate relationship with it.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did.
interesting.
I was like, I don't want to tell them anything. This is stupid.
Yeah.
But I also, it worked well most of the time. There were a few times when I was like already at a 1 and I didn't want my parents to know. And so I was like, yeah, I'm at like a 3 or 4. And then it turned into 5. I'm doing awesome. But really, I was at a 1 and I just didn't want questions. So it works well, but
You
that how
have
it-
to be
is that-
honest.
yes.
Is that how it went for the first X amount of days, but then the honesty started to come out? Or was that something that sustained for a long time?
It kind of depends on the day. Sometimes I was honest and I was like, yep, I'm not doing well. I'm at like a 2, or even sometimes I'd text them and they wouldn't ask. Like I remember one time I texted them and they were out at dinner and I was like, I'm at a 2 right now. But then some days were just it was just harder to be honest, and I really didn't want questions. So I would say I was at like a 3 or a 4.
Yeah.
Do you think did you think about it every single day?
Think about what?
The incident and how you
Oh.
were feeling from New Year's Eve until this day, every day.
Every single day.
Isn't that crazy how much, oh man, it's something from an addict side of, and from the addiction side of things, and just the consumption of your brain and your emotions, how it's bondage. It's the worst bondage that a person walking on the face of this earth can actually go through. It's like, because it just starts to eat and eat and eat. You can't even comprehend. You can't walk through life in your full purpose and joy and peace and all the things that come from God, right?
Right.
It's like the devil just straps on these balls and chains and I got you now.
Right.
And then you try to walk through and then it's muck and it's heavy. And so when you think about that every day, right?
Yeah.
And everyone around us is doing their thing and going about their day and just how all consuming something like that can be.
And it's crazy how I still think about it every single day. But the day my therapist looked me in the eyes and said, Grace, it is not your fault. That day she told me that and told me about the fawn response and how that's actually a real thing.
Yeah.
Like your body can actually just be so scared it just lets someone do anything they want to you. So the day I learned about that and the day I heard that sentence, I still think about it every day, but in a completely different way. I let myself think about it. I don't push it away. I let myself think about it and I let myself be sad and I let myself grieve the situation that had happened. And I feel better after I do that versus before for a good 3 years versus before then. I would think about it and I would beat myself up for it.
Going through that, I'm very sorry that all of this has transpired. But man, the girl that I'm looking at right now, Grace, like the things you've learned and what you've gone through, the lives you are going to change. So another like little notch, I guess, in your brain to think about like, yeah, I went through that. That's so hard. And that sucked. That was awful.
Yeah.
But gosh dang it, I'm getting like I am full speed ahead and I'm going to light this world up with the who God made me to be.
Right.
And now I know exactly where I stand. Guys better watch out. Like don't even mess with, and because Lon's coming for you too, if that's
Right.
But like just, you're a beautiful soul and
Thank
you
you.
can tell like you just have matured and your wisdom has it's far beyond anyone, like people your age. So
Thank you.
kudos to you for attacking it head on, calling your dad, speaking out, sitting here today. Like you're truly making a difference in this world. And
Thank
thank you for
much.
doing that.
Of course.
Is there any last things that you guys would like to say, or Amos, if you have any other questions?
I love the communication tool.
Yeah.
And I love how that you put not just a number, 5 is good, 1 is bad, but you tied some descriptions to it. And I appreciate your honesty on how it worked sometimes and it didn't work sometimes, but you stuck through it. You stuck with it and you're still sticking with it.
Yeah.
It's still a tool that you use today. It just took some time to get through it.
It gets
And-
easier to be honest.
Good. That's good. I was in a meeting today with my team and I didn't want to be honest when I rated the end of the meeting. I'm an adult because I felt bad about how I felt about it, you know, and that's a tough thing. And, but it's a tool that we get to use. And my encouragement to our listeners is don't give up on that and
Right.
iterate, keep trying and just communicate about the communication.
And
right?
listen. That's another big one too for parents.
And listen.
Let the parents listen.
Yeah. Is that how hard is that to just listen?
You know, it is hard. It's hard for everyone. But if you're really being honest, it's harder for some than others. You know, and that's just a fact of the matter. And we're all, as parents, wired to be fixers. I mean, that's what we want to do. We want to fix whatever problems our kids have. And I would say, especially our generation, you know, my parents didn't spend a lot of time fixing stuff for me, but yet we're wired to just kind of want to be fixers. And look, that's super admirable on one hand, but not always effective on the other. And so the natural instinct is want to get in and fix. And what you have to do is you have to get in and understand. You have to start there before you ever have a chance of being able to fix it. And look, I'm saying this after getting it wrong for a long time. This is advice that I didn't know going in. This is advice that I could have used. Don't spend your time worrying about how to fix anything. Get in, get dirty, and figure out what they're experiencing. Whether it's alcoholism, figure out what alcoholism is. Figure out what the process is. Figure out what the language is. Educate yourself, immerse yourself, go there.
Yes.
Same with mental health. Don't show up thinking you can fix it using your smarts and your cerebral part of your brain. It is worthless. And in fact, it's a wedge. You gotta communicate from where they are.
Yep.
And it requires work. And you can't just show up and use what you use to run a good meeting to be a good dad or to be a good husband. You gotta do the work to learn the language. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
You
But
don't know what you don't know
important.
until you get in there and you realize how much you don't
You're
know.
gonna make it worse.
Yeah.
You sit there thinking you're helping and you're making it worse.
Yeah.
We experience the exact same thing. Yeah. It's like you can't do better unless you know better. And so there's many times in our marriage, parenting, friendships, all of it. I love that, Lon. I love it. The language, you have to learn it. You don't have to experience it, but you need to go there. The
Yeah.
getting dirty, to really just sit with someone and hear the depths of all, just because it like things.
Yeah. I think the biggest challenge with that is there's a plethora of information, right? And sifting through the noise is a hard thing. And I found, just if we want to give people tools to find stuff, there's Google, right? Okay, well, Google is noisy.
Yeah.
It is. So there's YouTube, and there's good advice and bad advice on YouTube, but there is a lot of good advice. And as you go through more, things will start to float to the surface, right? You'll start to see a thread. I've learned recently that some of these AI tools, like Bard from Google, is a great way, alternative to doing a Google search. And I was trying to research a company the other day, and I couldn't get through on my Google searches. And so I put it into Bard, and it came through with some helpful resources, and I got my answer answered within a couple seconds. It was amazing. So that's a new tool, I think, that people can use to get to those kind of answers and start that research journey, that learning journey.
And then also
Not a sponsor.
going directly to the source, someone who has experienced it.
Yes. Yeah.
Someone who has been there. Like, man, like I can sit here I can just look at you and you not even saying a word. I can feel the feeling of walking through those front doors, of going and getting help, of a inpatient treatment center.
Yeah.
Find the people who've been there, that have experienced it, have the conversations, because the minute that you feel like you have been seen and heard and understood, there's a level of, like, you shed a layer and then another layer. And then it's like pretty soon you're like, wow, I'm not alone. Mm-hmm. There's other people who've experienced this, because that isolation and feeling alone is really hard. So even for you, Lon, to find other parents that have been through it, like, what did you do? Seek the people who have already walked the walk and are honest, authentic, who really are speaking truth. Because there's other people who will feed you full of the hype of the world. And it's not about the worldly ways. It's about, we live in a world that it can be pretty gross. And so we have to always center it back to truth, which
Yes.
is the biblical truth. So I also want to do the shout out for you, Lon, because from the moment that I've met you, watching your passion and watching what you have done, and you just being so vulnerable on a platform, and like, you're not just screaming from the mountaintops, you're literally walking the mountain with all these people, and you're taking them with you, and you're changing lives left and right from just being so open and honest. And so if you are not familiar with Lon, please go on to LinkedIn. He's got a private group called Normal 40. There are people from all over the world that are telling their story and speaking truth about their walk in the corporate world and wanting to jump. And, I just read a book. I'm not fully finished, but Think Like a Monk. It's such a good book.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, it talks about your dharma. And I love learning about all different religions and different practices and things that people do to find their peace. In the way that a monk, I look at Yulon, and I think when I was listening to that, it's the people are all just trying to find their dharma, the place where they fully feel like they're doing what God has called them to do on this earth. And when you hit that, just the way you soar in ways that you didn't have, you're like, what? Like, what is all this? And you're like, it's because you're operating in exactly what God put you on this earth to do, and you're living it. Like, it's fun to watch you doing it, and you're taking people with you. So just major kudos to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then the book is called The Trade, Moving from the Life You Have to the Life You Want. And again, that is what I just talked about. So ultimately, the two of you, this father-daughter beautiful bond that you guys have is very admirable. Is that the right word? Admiral?
Almost.
I'm like, no, that's like someone in the Army. Or
Admirable.
A Navy, actually.
Navy. Oh,
Time to wrap.
yes. That's the time. It's too many words have come out of my mouth. Okay. So I admire it very,
Thank you.
very much. It's beautiful.
Yes.
So thank you for continuing to speak out about what happened. You're very brave.
Thank you.
Very brave.
Yes.
And you too, Lon. From the parent perspective, it's both of you guys. I love you both. So
Thanks for
you
being
too.
here.
yeah, that was quick for you and I to fall in love, but it happened. So
did.
Amos is like, oh, girls.
We get each other.
We do. I see you.
This is a different communication language. I'm not
This is
really familiar with this.
Don't try to judge, seek to understand. This is where you use your ears only.
Yes. Do not judge us for our awesomeness.
Never.
Thank you for tuning in, Fortitude audience. Every time that we get the opportunity to share a story, we love that you tune in and put new tools in your toolbox. So thank you very much for being here.
Thanks you. Thank you.
Thank you.